Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News. And if you are tuning in, you might be smarter than the average bear. And as threatened, I am doing a video on 9/11 on 9/11. Against my better judgment. I don't know. At first, I was just going to completely ignore the whole thing, but I think a lot of other people are doing just that, ignoring the whole thing. Every time this day rolls around every year, usually there's some kind of remembrance or people, talk about it or discuss it. The only thing I saw on Facebook today was somebody saying it's impossible to have that large of a if 9/11 was a conspiracy, it would be impossible to keep that a secret. Somebody would talk, somebody on the inside of the conspiracy would talk. I don't know. Maybe that's a good point. If it really, if it was a conspiracy, and it, in my mind, it totally was, or is, or is currently a conspiracy. People are currently conspiring to tell you the wrong story about 9/11. So the conspiracy is ongoing. But you would think, if it was that large that somebody would come out and say something. And I don't know. Maybe there's a really good control mechanism going on around it. Some people think that the Mossad had something to do with it. Many people have come to that conclusion that somehow it was orchestrated, or somehow Israel had its hand in the whole thing. And in my mind, if they were involved, if you take that a step farther, maybe there's some kind of blackmail, a retribution kind of mechanism in place for anybody who goes outside of the official story. Plenty of people who were close to 9/11 who were there or were in the buildings, plenty of people have died or are not around anymore, or some people who were really looking into it have been silenced one way or another. I don't know. But it seemed to be, a pretty hot topic of discussion, after the event, and for quite a few years after that, after the loose change videos were made, and there were all kinds of different theories. There was, Judy Wood and architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, et cetera, et cetera. It's such a huge area of study and such a huge thing to cover that there are so many aspects of it. I can only hope to fail in my attempt to discuss it, and I don't know. I'm always looking for a better way to communicate truths or facts or evidence, or how I see facts or evidence to people. And most of the time I feel like I fail pretty badly. I feel like I'm always getting like a D- when I'm trying to convey climate change fact to deniers, or to people who might not understand it, or even to people that totally understand climate change but don't understand abrupt climate change. I feel like I do a pretty miserable job. And in my attempts to talk about 9/11, I feel like I'm going to do a pretty miserable job, but here I am doing it anyways. It's one of those things. It's just so big. To actually think or accept the fact that this could be a conspiracy, that this could be orchestrated by nefarious elements in the government or outside of the government or in conjunction with the government, or, to think that or to believe that is to accept that this country is built on some pretty disgusting things. And, if you just go back through history, you could see that there's a line of disgusting events that this country is built on. From slavery through Jim Crow forward, through, two world wars that, we're told about, that are about freedom and, fighting the evil, the axis of evil and the Nazis and all that. But, realizing that those wars were also conveniently plays by corporatists or very wealthy people to really just do really well on the stock market and make a lot of bank and sell war goods and supplies to other countries. And, Prescott Bush was doing business with the Nazis. So, and there's a whole lot of, and then a lot of the Nazis kept on doing business after the war, and a lot of the Nazis were brought to the States to run the OSS and then the CIA, and then, there were Nazis in NASA, and there's, et cetera, on and on. And then, through, excuse me, Vietnam, through the assassination of JFK, through the assassination of resistance leaders. It just, there's just a trail of pretty remarkably terrible things that are part of the history of the United States. And, 9/11 is really a great example of kind of an Orwellian, just an ultimate mind bending of masses of people. If you have something that big happen and you tell everybody that this is, these people did it and this is why they did it and this is why we needed to respond like this, and whole, millions of people believe this story and believe everybody that questions this story is some kind of insane lunatic or really bad person, or, disgusting, or, whatever. I mean, it's the ultimate 2 + 2 = 5, right? And you have basically people that understand that 9/11 was not the story that we were told. 9/11 didn't happen. The inconsistencies, the list of inconsistencies and coincidences is so long and so astounding. Once you understand that it's, what a disgusting thing 9/11 was, when you hear people defend the official story or, call people conspiracy theorists for questioning 9/11, you're really in a situation where people are like 2 + 2 = 5. And, you're just the worst person in the world if you don't believe that. And that's the madness that people are saddled with in their minds. When you have people, on Facebook or just in the, people on news stations and news channels, and all the politicians are like, when Al Qaeda attacked us that day, oh, what a horrible day that was. It's just a reinforcement of 2 + 2 = 5, 2 + 2 = 5, 2 + 2 = 5. I mean, it makes me totally understand why people think climate change is a hoax. It makes me totally understand why people think that all the weather is manufactured, or it makes me understand because, once you understand that this thing was perpetrated not by Al Qaeda, but by other people, other forces, then everything doesn't look real anymore, right? It's really easy to start thinking that, nothing is what it seems, right? And everything, we live in a matrix, and everything is an illusion. So even though I'm really upset at climate deniers, and even though I really, um, I get angry about the situation around climate change and how, again, we're not being told the truth about that, and um, we're being fed like a whole nother story about that. And, you have the president of the United States saying climate change is a hoax, and you have, plenty of people in the United States thinking, oh, well, if he says so, or, buying into this, again, the idea that it's all an illusion, that some, the globalists or these people, those, they created. Um, on some level, I totally understand. I get it. Climate deniers make me upset as hell, but on some level, I totally understand why they think what they think. And again, this is just another brick in the wall of brainwashing, or just mind washing people, just convincing people that uh, what is there is not really there, or what isn't there is really there. And it's hard to know. It's hard to know which is which is why I like to talk about these things on this channel, and why a purpose of this channel is to poke holes in certain silos of thought. So anyways, they're just, when I think about 9/11, when I talk about 9/11 to people, I try to just really break it down to a few simple things that people can think about, or maybe understand. There are so many, once you start talking about 9/11, you can be like, oh, and in this thing, and there was this, the put options in the stock market, and people made a lot of money off 9/11 happening, because somebody made some bets a couple days before, and then that happened. There was the insurance policy that the owner of the World Trade Center took out right before it happened. Oh, and they made, billions of dollars on a payout from the insurance. You can go on and on and on, and you can just keep citing this list of weird stuff that happened around 9/11, and it just starts sounding kind of crazy. You can overwhelm people with it. So, whether you think that it's possible to have such a large conspiracy take place and nobody blow the whistle on it, whatever, that's fine. That might be a legitimate thing to think. But what I try to break it down to is just physical things that happened, that couldn't have happened the way that we were showed on the television, right? And that's another thing, is people saw it happen on TV. So of course it happened. Of course it happened this way. Of course it happened how they said. We saw this horrible thing happen on television. It must have been real. And that's a difficult one to get around. So how, what do you say to people who actually believe, who saw this thing happen on television and thought, well, of course this happened. It's hard to get past that one. I saw it on television. It must be true. I saw it on the news. It must be true. I mean, the things I like to talk about, and I'll talk about them just very quickly. And before I get into this, and I'm not trying to go too long on this, but people did die that day. And, if you think it was as a result of an attack by certain people, and you're really horrified about people dying, being casualties of this attack, sure, I get it. You could be really horrified by that. And if you to possibly put the idea forward that these people died because of people within our own government or within our own military, or forces in our government and military working in tandem with someone else to make this happen, then that creates in me a mind-numbing rage, because if somebody made this happen within the government, I really, really, really want to know who, and I really, really want them to face the worst possible punishment that they could possibly face. Because, if that's what happened, if that's the truth, you got to be angry about that. You got to be really angry about that, because everything else that happened since then is also just mind-numbingly rage-inducing. Anyways, number one, the building collapses themselves. Physically impossible. The way they said, building fires cannot cause buildings to collapse. Steel buildings, that is, that only burned for a day, a couple hours, a few hours. The top floors of buildings 1 and 2 cannot pancake the rest of the floors down because they don't carry enough energy in them. There's not enough force, right? Weight. You think that the weight of this top building just, completely overwhelmed the whole structure, steel and cement structure that was, very, very much solid, not melted steel, all the floors underneath, all the way down to the ground. Like, that is a physically impossible scenario. Physically impossible. Because it would require so much energy to bring down a building in a controlled demolition. It requires so much energy. It requires explosives, taking out all of the inner supports, and then you got to take them all out at the same time, and then you got to, get the building from the bottom, and you've got to create such an impact of energy to get a building to come down like that. That just some seemingly weakened steel beams getting pancaked under the couple of floors of building. It just cannot happen. It cannot happen. It cannot happen. So look at this. So these are fires that raged in these buildings for days. Or maybe, or hours and hours and hours, like way, way longer than the World Trade Center fires. And these buildings did not collapse. This fire raging here on a bottom floor did not weaken the steel. And look at all this top floor here. So if this steel was weakened by a fire, we'll call this an office fire, because, what else is burning in there? All of this weight did not pancake this building down to collapse. Every single floor on this building is on fire. No collapse, right? And yet we're told that, these office fires, in a matter of hours, it's not possible. It is impossible. Let's go to I just want to quickly just go through a couple of things. This is, here's a building collapse. This is what a building looks like when it's collapsed by demolition. Notice the similarities in the big old dust plume pluming out. Here's building 7 collapsing.
At free fall speed in the first 100 feet. It's dropping, as you can see, symmetrically, smoothly.
Whoa, whoa. Office fires, guys.
2.5 seconds. This is a...
You really, it's a very big stretch of the imagination to think that office fires could create the same effect that, massive amounts of well-placed explosives can create in a building. My second point in this is that an aluminum plane cannot slice through such the incredible structure, the steel and concrete structure of these buildings cannot slice through it like butter. The whole plane cannot disintegrate in a fireball. All of the plane debris and wreckage cannot disintegrate. It can't happen. But we were told this over and over again on the news. People repeated this, and so people were like, "Yeah, sounds good." I don't know. There's millions of pictures of plane crashes on the internet and on YouTube. Just look them up. There's so much debris. There's plane debris. Here's a plane crashed into a building, bounced off the building, and it's outside the building. I understand this is a small plane, but it just, planes are incredibly light. That's how they fly. They're made from aluminum, which is a very light and a very, if you've held an aluminum can in your hand and went, psh, it's light, it's bendable, it's very, it doesn't have a lot of tensile strength. Even if the fuselage could go through the steel and concrete into the building, if you understand that the plane wings, the wings on a plane are like beer cans, that's usually where they put the fuel. They're usually, hollow. There's not a lot of, if you've ever seen a plane crash, the wings, if you've ever seen a plane land real hard on the ground, the wings go snap. They snap off the plane immediately. There's no way a wing can penetrate, an aluminum wing can penetrate steel and concrete. It is just impossible. I'm trying to explain this in a way so that I hope that people, who watch this can understand that, oh yeah, so it couldn't have happened the way that they told us. It couldn't have happened. And then that, if you realize that a plane can't pierce a building like that, then you have to go, well, then how did I see that on TV? And then you're like, whoa, so there's a whole other part to the story. That opens up a whole other can of worms that, a lot of people would rather just stop at, I saw it on TV. I saw it happen. So how could it possibly not be able to happen? Well, it can't happen. There was a plane that flew into the Empire State Building long ago. Lots of wreckage fell down outside of the building. Some wreckage got inside the building. There was a hole, like a nose hole, the nose cone pierced the building. But that building wasn't, the Empire State Building wasn't, the behemoth that World Trade Center is. It boggles my mind that people, and even progressive channels that are willing to say there was a false flag at the Gulf of Tonkin. That's how we got into Vietnam. There's false flag. Weapons of mass destruction was a total lie. That's why we went into Iraq. But why did we even have to start going into Iraq in the first place? It was because of 9/11. And every single progressive channel would be like, remember when Al-Qaeda, that horrible day when we were attacked? Not one of them will be like, remember that day when some really crazy, physically impossible things happened and everybody believed the story? Not one of them will do that. Jesse Ventura is one of the few people in the public eye that, questioned the story, and there he is right there. There's his mug. Questioned the story, publicly, out loud, and somehow he's still around, which is, he doesn't really talk about it too much, but why isn't there, why hasn't there been an actual investigation? Another, an outside investigation, I don't know. My thoughts are, again, that there is some kind of retribution or blackmail, something in place, that kicks in if somebody really, really starts to look into this. If somebody on a national level or some huge group, publicly was like, we're going to do this investigation, it's, something bad would happen to those people. Or maybe not. I don't know. But it would be really nice to see. The last point I'm going to also bring up is the flight that supposedly crashed in Flight 93, Pennsylvania, supposedly crashed into the ground with zero debris. Again, any plane crash video, any footage from a plane crash, any footage from after a plane crash, there was so much debris around. There was absolutely no way that a plane can pulverize itself from the force of a crash. Is the first time in the history that's ever happened. And when all of the towers fell, the 3 towers fell on 9/11, it was the first time in the history of the world that a steel and concrete building fell. It just collapsed on itself, period. Or all the way down to the ground. First time in the history. So a lot of firsts that day on 9/11, a lot of firsts. And I could go on and on and on. Why were the fighter jets, why were we doing a test? Why were the fighter jets far away? Why were the bin Ladens flown out the same day? They weren't held and questioned, et cetera, et cetera. Why did Dick Cheney call off the fighters? There was a, famous moment where somebody asked Dick Cheney what what shall we do, sir? And he was like, stand down. I mean, if this isn't obvious to you, I think that people, if you really start to look at what the things that went on around it, and it's not obvious to you that there was something wrong with the story, then I think that you really, really, are doing some mental gymnastics to try and believe the official story. And, why hasn't somebody talked about it? Why isn't somebody hasn't somebody come out and said, like, I have some inside scoop on 9/11, or I know who did it. I don't know. Again, I think that there's something else at play. That there's a way to control that information getting out, or not, or maybe just everybody has accepted this false reality and it's easier for people to go, that's what happened. It's a lot easier, because to look at the truth and look at what the evidence actually tells us or shows us is really hard. It's really hard to get that, to grapple with that, to get your mind around that. And then what do you do with that? What do knowers of this truth do with that? And there were a lot of truth movements. There were a lot of families of people that died in 9/11 who understood that the story was wrong, that it was not, that story did not hold up, and they demanded truth from people, and they didn't get it. And it's been a long time since 9/11 happened. Maybe people are just tired of talking about it or tired of thinking about it, but some of the people who were, running the show are still very much alive, and they're still around. And some of the people that were, Robert Mueller lied us into the Iraq War. Robert Mueller. was part of the WMD story. You know, the hero Robert Mueller that he is. You know, the teller of truth, the bringer of justice. Who knows? Maybe it's just all one big swamp, never-ending swamp, and Trump just, you know, got into office and just ramped the swamp up to, you know, insane levels of swampiness or swampitude. Who knows if we'll ever get some truth or some satisfaction. I myself would love to see some kind of real investigation into this. And I would like to see people talk about this. I would like to see people not scared to talk about this. I mean, that was another, you know, almost a brilliant move of the people that made the Russiagate story happen, and also smearing all, you know, all Trump supporters and all alt-right wingers or whatever as conspiracy theorists. You know, it was really easy to just scoop everybody up into this, you know, under this one big tent of crazy. Alex Jones and Donald Trump and all the conspiracy theorists, the nutters, you know, scoop them all up and tell everybody they're all crazy, and you know, then tell YouTube and all the social media people that, you know, these people are all crazy, and, you know, we're going to start blocking you, and we're not going to let you talk about this, and we're going to demonetize you, and we're going to, you know, we're not going to let this story get out. And there's actually been quite a squash on even 9/11 videos, and talking about 9/11. There's been a huge pushback even lately on YouTube. So I expect this video to be demonetized, of course. I don't really care. I just want to talk about this. I want to give 9/11 its due, at least on the day. Because it's even hard for me to talk about it. Every time I talk about it, I get a lot of pushback. I get a lot of people like, "Oh my God, oh my God, how can you talk about this?" I don't know. Why can't we talk about this? That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.